Pankti, I have sent you the file. I have emailed it to you.
Yes, ma'am, I'm checking it.
Yeah. Have you received the mail, Pankti?
Yes, ma'am, I have received it. I'm just downloading it. So just give me
Yes.
2 seconds.
Yeah.
I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. We can start now.
Okay. Rathod, sir.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Sir, if you can just give a briefing
Yes.
of the lecture.
Good morning, everyone. This is indeed a great pleasure to have a session today on state budget highlights with special reference to the education budget of Maharashtra state 2025-26. And we all know that the budget of the state will have the course of it has great impact and implications on the higher education. Therefore, to understand budget, for simplifying, we have with us Dr. Aparna Kulkarni, madam. She is a distinguished faculty member of economics at St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. I welcome Dr. Kulkarni, madam, to interact, to share her views on the budget 2025-26. Aparna, madam, welcome to this session. Our participants are different teachers of different subjects in CDOE, University of Mumbai. In the gathering, we also do have some faculty members from different backgrounds, but uh, common to all is the topic which is very important to understand for everyone. Welcome back once again, ma'am. Aparna, over to you. Hello.
Yes, yes. Am I audible? I hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yes, you are audible, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you, sir, for your kind words. And thank you also for giving me this opportunity to interact with people, those who also belong to the stream of education. And since all of us are in the same boat, we are sailing in the same boat since long, I think it's very important to understand the factors that are going to contribute and also affect our day-to-day life and the profession that all of us are in. So the topic for today's interaction is about dealing with the state budget, that is Maharashtra's budget 2025-26, through the lens of education. Now, before I begin, I must tell you that budget is a very important economic exercise for any country. But since we follow the federal structure in India, there are three different levels at which this budgetary exercise is done. So, first, the central government will have to present its budget. It will have repercussions on the state's, you can say the state's budget that we have. So, how much state is going to earn from the center, and how the state is going to make different allocations at different point in time. So from education point of view, what is done through this budget, that is 25-26 budget, by the finance ministry of state government of Maharashtra, that is what I will be focusing on. So as I mentioned earlier, India follows the fiscal federalism. So we have a central government, we have state government, and finally we have the local authorities like municipal corporations and other local authorities, which also have to have their own budgetary system. So the local self government, that kind of a mechanism, since it exists in India, the also have to participate in this exercise. Can you go back to the previous slide, please? Previous slide. Okay. So then the process here for presenting the budget is, first there will be economic survey for one financial year that the Union of States, that is state central government of India, will publish. Next slide, Pankti. Next slide, please. The second one. Yes, I'll tell you when to change the slide. So previous one. Okay, thank you. So the process goes like this. First, there will be economic survey that the central government will have to present in the parliament. Then there will be subnational, that is state governments will follow the same thing. So after the economic survey and budget presented by the central government, then state economic survey and state budget will be presented in their respective legislative assemblies. Now, since the center and state, these two different uh, agencies will have to present their budget. Of course, the components to some extent will be same, but certain components will be totally different, because in our country, the way central government is collecting its taxes and spending money, that pattern is slightly different than the state governments. So that the overall public expenditure or overall taxation system in India is a mix of the contribution made by the central government and the contribution of the state governments. So in order to visualize this federal structure in India, if you can see the picture, you will find that the central government will be supported, complemented, and it will be also participated by the state government. So then the states will have to join the hands with the national system that we have. So it is the contribution made by both the agencies, central government as well as the state government. So then, focusing more on the states, what do they contribute or what do they include in their budgetary system? So there are four main factors or four main elements of the budget that every state in India will have to produce. So the first component here is local taxation. taxes and expenditure policies. So even though we have certain taxes that are imposed and collected only by the union government, state governments also have their own taxation policy. They also have their own expenditure allocations, so that the states budgets will be comprising of the local taxes and expenditure policies. Secondly, state governments, if they have deficit, they will have debt, that is public borrowings and financing the public debt. Then, as I mentioned before, the state government will receive different types of grants from different agencies. For example, we have Niti Ayog. Earlier, it used to be called as the Planning Commission. So there used to be development assistance provided by the Planning Commission schemes, or there can be UGC grants and so on. So there are grants that the central government will provide, and accordingly, the states are supposed to implement the schemes in their own geographical areas. So the execution of center state schemes, which is the responsibility of the state government, they are involved in that, for which they are receiving the grants here. So that is third factor in the budgets of the state government. And the last one is different other subjects in state and the concurrent list as per our constitution. If you, I mean, since all of us are in the teaching field, we all must know that education is the subject that comes under the state list and also the concurrent list. So the legislature and the rules and regulations related to education, that can come either from the central government if there is a major decision like implementation of national education policy. Those major decisions will be taken up by the central government. The implementation will be done by the state, and certain local decisions that can be made by the state governments respectively, as and when it is needed. So that is the overall structure of the budgets at the state level. As I mentioned, some of the components are common in central and state government's budget, whereas certain components are completely different. So this is the overall structure. Can we go to the next slide, please? So then, looking at this particular budget in Maharashtra, all of us are aware that Maharashtra is the faster growing economy, and it is one of the progressive states in the country. So with respect to the GDP of our country, 14 to 16% of GDP contribution comes only from Maharashtra. So then, because of the tax revenue collection and capital expenditure, Maharashtra is known as economically progressive and one of the industrialized state in the country. As for the economic performance of our state, we are far ahead of the other states in our country. But of course, we also have certain limitations when it comes to the funding, when it comes to the execution of our plans in different sectors and so on. So with respect to the economic profile of Maharashtra state, there are four different parameters based on which it is possible to sort of assess the budget this year. So the first important parameter here is the overall size of the budget. So the other day, when our finance minister, Mr. Ajit Pawar, he presented the budget in our in the Vidhan Bhavan, he stated that the way Maharashtra's economy is making progress, it is of course far better than other states in India. But then looking at the numbers, we can find that the overall size of Maharashtra's budget this year is 7 lakh crores. Out of that, the total tax revenue collection is 5.33 lakh crores. Then the spendings, because as we are collecting the revenue through the taxes and non-tax ways, this has to be spent for different schemes. So then the total spendings, which are revenue and the capital spendings, that is around 7.20 lakh crores. So that the deficit here is 1.3 lakh crores. Now, the deficit, fiscal deficit here, which is very common across the states in India, and therefore the overall consolidated deficit of our country is more than 10%, which is the central government plus the state governments, which is greater than 10%. This indicates that the governments in India, both at central as well as the state level, they are spending more than what they are earning. So their earnings in terms of revenue and the capital receipts are not sufficient to finance all our expenses. So it can be either MG Narega or such big schemes that we implement in India, which are demanding huge public expenditure. As a result, the expenditure which is greater than the revenue, we are always running very high fiscal deficit. So as a part of that deficit mechanism, with respect to this financial year, the fiscal deficit is estimated to be 1.36 lakh crores. And this fiscal deficit, because of that, the state government is borrowing heavily from different resources. So if you then look at the borrowings of the state, you will find that the debt to GDP ratio for Maharashtra is 18.4%. So if, I mean, as per our GDP, the total SGDP of the state, the debt burden is of 18.4%, which means that most of the earnings that the state has, most of them are going into debt and debt servicing, which is causing another burden, which is causing excessive burden on the state's finances. So that it is important that we control our fiscal deficit so that the state can grow well in near future. So fiscal deficit, therefore, is a concern for the government and also especially the finance ministry of our state. So can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So with respect to the numbers, that is SGDP, state gross domestic product, of course, as per the budgets over the years and in recent past, we can find that the Maharashtra state has mainly focused on infrastructure development. So if you look at some major cities in our state like Mumbai, Pune, Nagpur, you will find that metro projects are going on, and through central government grants, there is a huge budgetary allocation for the public infrastructure that we have. It can be either digital infrastructure or it can be the physical infrastructure in terms of railways or dams, hospitals, schools, and so on. Major focus on that. Along with that, also have social welfare and social justice, for which the expenses are incurred. This year's number, this only scheme in our total budget is going to incur the expenditure of 36,000 crore rupees, right? So social welfare, one of the schemes which is so famous and which has played a key role in the state elections, one can find that the state is also having its priority towards the social welfare. Then the numbers also show that there is an increment in per capita income as far as Maharashtra's economic progress is concerned. So GDP is rising, as compared to that, our population is under control, so that the per capita income is also rising faster. So towards the aim of faster and inclusive growth, the state is making better progress. So the GDP growth rate, as far as this financial year is concerned, it is expected to be 7.8% as compared to previous financial year, which was 7.3%. This year, we are expected to grow faster than that. So the GDP progression, the expected GDP progression is better as compared to the last year's scenario. For the capital expenditure, this year's budget has allocated 93,165.52 crore rupees. Now, this capital expenditure is one of the key drivers of the growth in our state, so that this will continue. Because, of course, a progressive state like Maharashtra, which is expecting industrial development and startups and so on, it has to have capital expenditure which is heavier, and that will also create multiplier effect in future. So capital expenditure is one of the strengths of the state finance, and it has to continue in the future. So when I mentioned about the per capita income, as a result of the multiplier and the income level that is rising due to the public expenditure schemes in the state, per capita income for our state is 3,000. It is 3,09,340, which is much better than any other um, any other state in the country. So this per capita income, which is rising faster, that is a good sign as far as the economic progress of the state is concerned. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, let me focus on the important aspect which I have deliberately chosen for this particular session. That is looking at the state's budget from the education point of view. That is by using the education lens, how exactly the state budget is helping us to improve our education. Before I start, I must mention that education and the sector like health infrastructure or health system in the country, these two sectors are very, very important for HR, that is human resource. So, if we at all want to have human resource development, it is very essential that the state or public sector at large has to invest for education as well as health system at respective levels. So, it can be either central or the state government. Both of them will have to invest heavily for education and health, because since we are a middle income developing country, the capacity of the private sector to invest for education or public infrastructure for education or health system is going to be limited, so that we cannot expect much from the private sector. Of course, now our country has showcased a lot of success stories where the private sector has joined hands with the government in order to improve the infrastructure in education. There are a lot of education startups in edutech which are helping us improve the system. But of course, these startups or the private sector investment in education, that is not helping the poor people or the needy sections in the society. So that it is important that the public sector will have to do its own bit in order to improve the status of education, health, and so on. So, especially looking at this education budget in 2025-26, there are six important components that are clearly evident. The first one, the overall allocation for the higher and technical education, it has increased up to 16,261 crore rupees from 14,248 crore rupees as compared to previous financial year, right? So there is a marginal, a slight increase in the budget for higher and technical education, which is not really sufficient, because ideally we say that the size of education budget should be at least 6% of the GDP. But unfortunately, neither central or nor the state governments are able to achieve that level, because there are a lot of other expenses also that the public authorities will have. So that focusing only on education and spending up to 6% of GDP, that is just an ideal number that remains on paper. But in reality, our expenditure for education is much lesser than 6% of the GDP. So that continues here in case of Maharashtra also. So a slight increase in the education budget for higher and technical education has taken place. Secondly, the state government of Maharashtra has proposed a skill development university at Navi Mumbai. And as far as this year's budget is concerned, for the promotion, development, and institution of that skill development university, a total grant of 807 lakh crores is given. Right, so that particular university will be then instituted, and it will receive this much of grant from the state government. And it is expected that there will be a training facility provided to around 1,000 women in that Ratan Tata Skill Development University that will be established in Vashi at Navi Mumbai. So for women's human resource, or for women's participation in the workforce and their coaching and training for employability, the government has focused more on that, so that women's participation in the labor force that will increase. So we are associating their education, employable education, to their actual employment in the workforce. That is especially the women centric, or you can say it is the gender budget aspect of Maharashtra state. That is 2025-26 financial year. Also, the state government is going to reimburse 100% tuition and examination fees for the girls are those who belong to the EWS category, that is economically weaker sections. So for those girls, those who are into that category, for them there is 100% reimbursement of the tuition fees, so that we encourage them to get into the mainstream education. Right now, the Maharashtra state ranks one in terms of the enrollment of girls in the STEM education. Okay, so in science, technology, management, research, in all such fields, the female admission, the females enrollment is rising faster, and in Maharashtra is one of the leading state in that particular aspect. So here, such 100% reimbursement is definitely going to help out the females to come forward and get enrolled into the mainstream education. Apart from this, the school education department will receive the grant of 86.22 crores. So for school education under Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, certain allocations are made. So the total budget for school education, primary and secondary, will be up to 86.22 crores. But of course, looking at the overall social sector spending under education has declined by 4% in this particular budget. And I'll tell you, and I will come to the reasons, the causes why this has happened a bit later. So then, this shows that the overall allocation here for the education budget, it has declined by 4%, and whatever is allocated for education specially, it is underspent. So underutilization of the allocated funds remains an issue with respect to the social sector spendings in Maharashtra. So when I said that education and health both play a key role in human resource development, the first priority should be to increase the funding gradually. So every year, at least the allocation for education and health should increase by 2%, 3%. So that such gradual increase has to happen. And we should commit to that kind of expenditure consistently. So if suppose you are allocating 100 crores for a particular education plan or a particular scheme, 100% utilization has to happen. But in case of Maharashtra, that has been the issue. So the budgetary commitment is one story, but the underutilization of that fund is another story. And therefore, we are in a trap. So first of all, the fundings are insufficiently, it is underspent. That is why we are facing two issues with respect to education in the state of Maharashtra. So the next slide will show you. Next slide, please. Can we have the next slide? Yeah. So the twin problems with respect to our education budget is, first, there's lack of funds, right? So we don't have sufficient funds that are allocated towards primary, secondary, and the higher education. So there is uneven allocation for allocation of budget at each level. Of course, we cannot say that all the three sectors in education will have equal or some kind of similar needs. No, the need of budget for the primary education, it's certainly different than what we have to have in the higher or technical education. So then, as per the needs and as per the local challenges, the allocation of funds, it has to happen. But first of all, from the quantity point of view, from the point of view of magnitude of the funding for primary, secondary, and tertiary education, that differs drastically. So it is inadequate. That is one problem. And secondly, it is underutilized also. Now, what is underutilization? So when fewer resources are used than the capability of the economy, so or the capability of the resources that we have, that problem is known as underutilization. Now, with respect to the social sector spendings in Maharashtra, it is clearly evident. First of all, the inadequate funding that we are providing, that too also we are not able to utilize effectively. So that has been the issue with respect to our social sector. Now, here, when we say that there are fundings, I mean to say that the state government here is receiving the grants, especially for education sector, through three schemes that the central government is going to run, right? So first of all, we are receiving grants. I mean, in the current context, it is through PM Pusha. So that is related to Uchchatar Shiksha, that is higher education. Secondly, there are fundings that are allocated by RUSA, that is Rashtriya Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan. And for primary and secondary education, there is the SSA, which is Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Now, these are three very important flagship programs of the central government. Now, through which the states are receiving grants. Now, with respect to the state of Maharashtra, there are multiple colleges in mega cities of the state. And from Mumbai, there are two colleges. One is the Kirti College in Dadar. So, such colleges which are showing potential of excellence, they are receiving grant of 5 crores for 5 years. Now, with such allocation for upgradation of technology, upgradation of educational infrastructure at college level, that has to be considered, and that has to be also treated sincerely, so that those 5 crores, if they are used at college level effectively, that will really create good educational infrastructure for the nation. But the problem with the states is sometimes it is the lethargy, sometimes it is the political unwillingness that we are not properly allocating the grants, or sometimes there are delays due to which these problems continue to be there. Therefore, especially for the state of Maharashtra, which has started executing the national education policy, has to then consider, or it has to first look at the difference in terms of our education sector pre-NEP and post-NEP, because since we have adopted the NEP structure, it is very important for us that we understand the challenges post-NEP, and we address those challenges by using budget as an important tool. So next slide, I'm going to talk about some of the needs, the funding needs basically, that budget can very well address. So coming to the education scenario in state of Maharashtra, we find that 3 years back we started executing NEP, which is National Education Policy, and the way state of Maharashtra started implementing that was slightly different than the other states like MP or Karnataka. Of course, there's two states which have already implemented NEP before Maharashtra, like MP or Karnataka. Their patterns are different. Karnataka has, I mean, honestly, they've rolled back. So then, with respect to the structure that Maharashtra has adopted, we find that before NEP, the infrastructure needs at the college level or university level, they were not that intense, and the existing infrastructure, it was sufficient. But now with NEP implementation, we are asking the entire the set of stakeholders to gear up for the new technology and the new courses to increase the employability of the students and so on. Now, with respect to this, if we simply compare the rural urban gap here, one can find that even in urban areas, in cities, the infrastructure which is expected for better implementation of NEP is insufficient. So, if you look at most of the good colleges, big colleges, you will find that number of classrooms are not sufficient, or the grants that are needed to upgrade the technology, they are also not sufficient. So then, for improving the employability of the students and to make education accessible and inclusive, if the NEP is expecting us to achieve these objectives, where is the money for that? Where is the funding for that? Now, private colleges and universities will still be able to address this because they are financially autonomous, and they have their own ways to generate the revenue. What about the affiliated colleges and the universities? With respect to the educational geography in Maharashtra, you will find that the four development zones in the state, they have different status of education. So if you go to Vidarbha, if you go to Marathwada, or maybe the Pune region or Mumbai region, you will find that education here, there is a lot of inequality in terms of the quality of education and the quantity of education. So if that is the case, for regional balance and to achieve even development in terms of educational access and educational inclusivity, lot of changes and lot of reforms are necessary. So then, with respect to the NEP structure here, the state is supposed to address the financial challenges first, so that at university and the college level, these stakeholders will be able to work better in terms of supply. So then the universities and colleges are supposed to provide them better infrastructure, digital infrastructure, computer labs, or maybe e-resources at the library, more classrooms, more number of teachers. So in the state of Maharashtra, the problem is the regular teacher, the appointment of the regular teacher, that has been the issue since long, but then that issue is not addressed. So the on the supply side, if you simply look at some parameters like number of colleges providing particular courses, number of regular teachers and their appointments at university and college level, all such issues exist, so that there is a gap, there is a demand and supply gap that the state will have to address on priority basis. Then only will be able to implement NEP successfully. Fine. On the other hand, when we say that the NEP is expected to make education inclusive, okay, now what is inclusivity? Even the students, those who are at the bottom of our income pyramid, those who do not have sufficient money to get access to different courses, we need to make education inclusive for them. But in terms of inclusivity, you will find that with NEP, the fee structure at college level and university level has changed completely. So earlier they used to pay the fees for the entire course. Now they will be paying the fees course wise, the subject wise. Now, if that is going to be the case, and the fourth year NEP is going to be self financing, I, to my mind, education is going to be the tool for perpetual inequality in the state. Because this way, if you are making education expensive for the needy students, we are, rather violating the very objective of NEP here. So, if we don't want education to become expensive, do we have more and more subsidies for such students, those who will not be able to afford education? So, are we really working on the subsidy aspect of education, or maybe the subsidies and the scholarships for the students, those who have some financial problems? So, are we addressing those issues enough? We only say that the education for girls is free, right? But then at ground level, when you're looking at the ground reality, you'll find that waiving of the tuition fees is not the sufficient measure here, because with respect to girls enrollment and their actual attainment of education at ground level, there are different problems. So in cities like Mumbai, when girls have to travel a lot on daily basis to reach the premises of college or universities, a lot of issues. So unless and until we are addressing these problems, we won't be able to make education accessible, inclusive, and so on. Therefore, since post NEP, the scenario is going to be completely different. The government is expected to treat education on priority basis. That is one thing. But secondly, when the policy for education has to be treated on priority basis, we have to first think of the supply side. So the public universities in the state should get greater fundings, so that there will be a trickle down, that is from universities, the affiliated colleges will get more and more grants. And we can also utilize the grants given by the central government at the local level. So with such trickle down, the stakeholders, the institutions which are offering education to the students, those educational institutions will be empowered. So we need to empower the trainers first. We have to train the trainers from academic and financial point of view in order to improve our education system. Then only this entire exercise of implementing NEP to make education inclusive, accessible, and so on, all such objectives can be served. So therefore, from this point of view, if you only consider the parameters of NEP, the local challenges, of course, this year's budget in Maharashtra state is not very satisfactory. Rather, there are inadequate and insufficient provisions. and certain areas are completely ignored. So, what about the standalone entities in the education sector? Like technical education department will have several standalone entities. Like for example, the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, or we have different other universities which are standalone. They only focus on one area as such. What about them? They have not received major grants for their improvement. Secondly, if you associate education with employment, of course we wish that employment should increase in a progressive state like Maharashtra. But then the link of education and employment, that works via the industrial sector, because industries are employers of the people, those who are taking education now. Are we giving them enough opportunities to get ready for the corporate sector or the corporate skills that are imparted through our education system? Now, in order to strengthen the bond between industry and academia, are we planning something? Are we doing some important steps in order to improve the bond between industry and academia? All these questions remain unanswered, and that has been the trend in past few years in the state, that education is largely ignored. The major focus has been on sectors like infrastructure, or it is on agriculture. Fine. Now, I'm not saying that those sectors are not important, but the point is, since we do want to have the sectoral balance, and we also want to improve the social sectors like education, health, and there has to be a parity in terms of the sectoral development, we cannot afford to ignore the importance of education as such. So instead of having such inaccessible and exclusive education system, can we make it better? Can we make it more inclusive and more accessible by giving more and more grants to the public universities, to standalone institutions, and also at the college level, there should be certain incentives for the suppliers or the stakeholders, so that the supply side at least can be managed, and then we can focus on the demand side. So the discrepancy between the supply and the demand side with respect to education is the root cause of most of the problems. So we need to work on the root causes here in order to improve our education system, so that once the education employment link is strengthened, we'll be able to generate more employment opportunities. But and also, since the employability of the students has improved, we will make more progress in the near future. That is why, for the need of the hour from the government point of view is to improve the allocations for the education sector, and such general ignorance to the education is not going to be an affordable task or affordable matter anymore. So they have to take it up as their priority, and then of course education here would have its own linkages and the multiplier effect in near future. So these are some of the expectations that we have from the government. Of course, every budget will always show you, or it will showcase the gap between what is expected and what is the reality. That is why it is called as Artha Sankalpa. In Marathi, budget is called as Artha Sankalpa. So it is a Sankalpa, it is a kind of future plan or future actions that we want to undertake. But what we do in reality is again a different story. So the gap between our what we decide for future and what we do in reality, that is always showcased in every budget. So of course the gaps will continue to be there, but then a consistency in our objectives and the consistency in our actions will definitely help us improve the economic status of Maharashtra, and also will be a key player in the national development. So on this positive note, I would like to stop here. Of course, there are many numbers that we can discuss, but since I have focused more on education, these are some of the important aspects from this year's budget that we can discuss. So now I'm open for all questions. I hope I was able to give you certain insights from the budgetary numbers of this financial year. If there are questions, I would be happy to take them. Are there any questions? I hope my voice is
Yes,
reaching to
ma'am,
you
you are
already.
audible.
Yeah, yeah.
If
So if there are any
anyone,
questions, we can open the floor for questions now.
yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you, ma'am. It was a wonderful and enlightening session for every one of us. Belonging to the field of education, we always we look for various insights for the budget and how it is going to especially impact our future generations and our own teaching faculties. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us uh, and being a wonderful audience for the same. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I hope this interaction and discussion has helped the audience to maybe get certain insights from the budget. And most importantly, what I feel is as a society, we don't take budget seriously.
Yes,
And then there's lack of awareness, also, lack of willingness, also. And as a result, we don't really find it interesting, and therefore we don't know many things. But of course it's of course our public money, no? It's our own money that government is utilizing for different purposes, so that we have to have at least basic knowledge and basic understanding of the structure of the budget and how it is utilized. So our
correct.
own money, if it is underutilized, that is the problem with our democracy. That is the problem with our social structure. So we need to then take initiative to ask our representatives if they are not spending sufficiently. If that money is not utilized for us, that is the beneficiary group, we always have full right to ask our representatives. So we need to ask them why, how, when, all such questions we need to throw them so that they will be alert and conscious enough to utilize the public money.
Yes, ma'am. And we have various faculties belonging to different backgrounds who have joined in this session, and also students of various disciplines. So this has genuinely given us a very good idea about the application of budget in our teaching and learning process. So thank you, ma'am. I'll
Thank you
end the.
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was nice to interact with you all, although it was not really interactive, but still, I enjoyed the session.
Yes, actually, now we all are in a thinking process, so we will definitely come up with the
True, true, true.
questions.
Yes, yes, it happens. It
Yes,
happens. I can
yes,
understand. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you
Welcome.
so much. Yeah. I'll take the leave then.
Yes, ma'am.